Hello, everyone. I'm Sam. Welcome to His Word is a Lamp. We'll resume our reading of the story of Rolf and the Vikings' bow in Chapter 9 of the outcome of Ondat's plottings. Now spring was well advanced, but the work was ever hard at Cragness, and Hrandi grew very weary. So his melancholy gained on him again. There came a morning when he was troubled in his demeanour, and spoke little. "What ails thee this day?" asked Asdis of him. "Now," said Hrandi, "for all my words to Einar, this life irks terribly. Better to be an outlaw, and go where I will, as doth Grettir the Strong, who lives secure from all his foes." Asdis answered, "And what use, then, couldst thou be to thy wife and son? Is not the time short enough until the ban leaves thee? Be a man, and wait with patience a little while yet." "Yet something weighs upon me," pursued Hrandi, "for last night I dreamed, and the dream forebodes ill. Methought I was working in the field, and I left my work and my land. Some good reason I had, but it is not clear to me now. I did not go a bowshot beyond the boundary, but from behind a copse wolves sprang out and fell upon me. As they tore me, and I struggled, I awoke, yet the fear is heavy on me still." Asdis laughed, though with effort, and quoth she, "Now take thy boat, and fish near the rocks this day. Then no wolves can come near thee." "Nay," answered Hrandi, "how canst thou ask me to fish, when so much must be done on the farm?" "At least," said Asdis, "work on the northern slope, at the ploughing, and away from the boundary. The frost still lies there in the east, in the earth in places," replied Hrandi, "but on the south slope, where the sun lies, all is ploughed, and today we must seed." "Take thy sword then," begged Asdis, "and have it at thy side as thou workest. Then no wolf will hurt thee." But Hrandi answered, "The day is fine, and the wind is soft. The sun and the air will clear my head, and we will laugh at this at eventide. I will take no sword, for it gets in the way." And then he called the thrall and Rolf, and they took the bags of seed and went out to work. Now that was a fine spring day, so fine that the like of it seldom comes. Old farmers in Broadfirth still call such a day of Hrandi's weather. But Asdis detained Rolf, and spoke to him earnestly. "Dreams often come true, and wolves in dreams mean death. See, I will lay by the door thy father's sword and thy bow, so that thou canst snatch them at need. Be near thy father this day, for I fear he is fey, as is said of those who see their fate and avoid it not. And watch well what happens." So Rolf stayed near his father all that morning, working with him and the thrall at the sowing, but nothing happened. And the sun and the air cleared from Rolf's head all fear of ill, yet Hrandi was still gloomy and absent-minded. Then, when they stopped for their meal at noon and ate it as they sat together on a rock, Rolf spoke to Hrandi, trying to take his mind from himself. "Tell me," he begged, "what sort of man is that outlaw Grettir the Strong, and for what is he outlawed?" Then Hrandi told the tale, and as he spoke he grew more cheerful. "Grettir," said he, "is the strongest man that ever lived in Iceland, and no 3 men can master him, for he himself hath said that he hath no fear of 3, nor would he flee from 4, but with 5 he would not fight unless he must. All his life he has been rough, impatient of control, and at home only amid struggles and slayings. Yet for all that he is a man of ill luck rather than misdeeds, for he hath been greatly hated and provoked, and it is great harm for Iceland that Grettir ever was outlawed." Now this was the cause of his outlawing. Once in Norway Grettir lay stormbound with his companions, and they had had much ado to make the land at all. They lay under the lee of a dike, and had no shelter nor wherewith to make fire, and the weather was exceeding cold, for winter was nigh. Then night came on, and they feared they should all freeze, and when they saw lights on the mainland across the sound, they desired greatly to unmoor their ship and cross, but dared not for the storm. Then Grettir, to save the lives of the others, swam the sound, and came to the hall where those lights were, and therein people were feasting. Then he went into the hall, But so huge is he, and so covered with ice were his clothes and hair and beard, that those in the hall thought him a troll. Up they sprang and set upon him, and some snatched firebrands to attack him, for no weapons will bite on witch or troll. He took a brand and warded himself, and won his way out, but not before fire had sprung from the brands to the straw in the hall. And he swam back with his brand to his companions, but the hall burned up, and all those that were therein. Now there were burned the sons of a man powerful here in Iceland. And for that deed, before ever he returned, Grettir was made outlaw. Because of the injustice he would not go away for his 3 years, but stayed here. Nigh 16 years he has been outlaw now, and lives where he may, so that many rue his outlawry, and he is not to be overcome by either force or guile. Great deeds, moreover, he has done in laying ghosts that walked, and monsters that preyed on men. Now, so far had Hrandi got in his story, when he turned to the thrall who sat thereby. "At what lookest thou, man?" "Nothing," answered the thrall, and turned his face another way. "Methought thou wert looking and signalling with the hand," said Hrandi. "And is there something there in those willows on Einar's land? What didst thou see?" "Nothing," answered the thrall again. "Nevertheless," said Hrandi, "go, Rolf, and fetch me my sword, for I repent that I came without weapon hither." Now Rolf had seen nothing in the bushes, yet he went for the sword and hastened, but the distance was 2 furlongs. Then after a while Hrandi grew weary of waiting, and he saw nothing at all in the willows. So he said to the thrall, "Now let us go again to work." But they had not worked long when the thrall looked privily, and he saw a hand wave in the willows. Then he cried aloud, "Goodbye, master," and he ran toward the place. Hrandi sprang from his work and ran after the thrall. Now the land at that place lay thus. At the foot of the slope was that brook which was Hrandi's boundary, and toward the sea on Einar's land was the thicket of dwarf willows, and a gnarled oak grew at a place away from the willows, standing alone by itself. So when Rolf came from the hall bearing the sword, and having also his bow and arrows, he saw the thrall fleeing and Hrandi running after. They reached the brook and leaped it and ran on, Hrandi pursuing most eagerly. The thrall ran well, but Hrandi used thought, for he turned a little toward the clump of willows, and cut the thrall off from them, where he might have hidden. Yet he might not catch the man who fled past the oak. Then Hrandi heard the voice of Rolf calling him to stop, so he remembered himself and stood still there at the oak, and turned back to go home. But men with drawn swords started up out of the willows, and ran at Hrandi. He leaped to the tree and set his back against it to defend himself. And Rolf, as he came running, saw how the men fell upon his father. The lad strung his bow as he ran, and leaped the brook, and laid an arrow on the string. When he was within killing distance, he set his arrow through one of the armed men. Then that struggle around Hrandi suddenly ceased, and the men fled in all directions, not stopping for their companion. But one of them carried a shaft in his shoulder, and a third bore one in his leg. And then Rolf saw how the thrall had loitered to see what was being done. But he ran again when the men fled. Rolf took a 4th arrow and shot at the slave, and it stood in the spine of him. Freedom came to that man, but not as he had deemed. Then Rolf ran to his father, who lay at the foot of the tree. He looked and saw that Hrandi was dead.